The Sony a6000 is a very good camera. In fact, it used to be a very popular option for those who wanted an affordable camera with less of a crop factor compared to a lot of, let's say, Canons, Panasonics, and many more offerings, since this uses a larger sensor. I bought this camera to actually use it as a webcam for the Tech Summit podcast, but I also wanted to offer a proper review of this camera since I do think that it is quite a good one for the prices that you will be able to find it for. Of course, as long as you buy it used. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. Before we continue, don't forget that I have a Twitch channel that you can go ahead and follow me on for live microphone reviews and much more than that. But you're also going to find my Instagram and a link to the Tech Summit Discord in the description. So come join the community because it is a pretty cool one. We've also opened up a Patreon as of late where if you join, you'll be automatically entered to win one tech gadget every month in our exclusive giveaways. Details to that are going to be down below. Don't forget to check out the description for everything. Now let's get right into the video. The exterior design consists of metal, and this, even though it is a more powerful camera with a bigger sensor than a lot of other options from other companies, this is still a very small camera, and it almost feels like a point and shoot, but not quite. It's got more to it in order to separate it from that category, because it doesn't really belong there. It has a hot shoe mount all the way on the top, with the flash, which can be toggled from the lightning button right on the back. And you're also going to find your typical controls on it, along with two customizable buttons, the electronic viewfinder, and inside of this latch, on the left, there is going to be a micro USB port for charging and a micro HDMI port as well. And not to mention the knobs up top in order to switch between your different shooting modes and more. It is going to be a pretty good selection overall if you ask me. Now this camera utilizes E-mount lenses, and the one that I have on it now is just a stock 16 to 50mm lens that, while standard for their APS-C line of cameras, it is a very good lens and will be great for a lot of different tasks as well, especially if you need a wide-angle lens. 60mm on a crop sensor like this is still pretty wide and still pretty decent. It's definitely going to be better than just micro four thirds. And so the lens that I came with, optical image stabilization on it, which is quite nice to have, though the body does not actually have it built in, and usually it is a lot better when the camera has both, and unfortunately you will not be getting that with the Sony a6000. So this camera does have a little display that you can articulate, but you can't really do much with it. There is no touch support at all, and as you can see here, the angles for articulation are very limited, which means that this would not be a very good vlogging camera, for instance. It doesn't have a microphone jack either, so it probably doesn't really even matter, but it is still kind of wasted potential there. Now the display itself in terms of quality is still pretty good though, and you can tell very clearly and when things aren't focused, and I actually really like it. I don't really have many bad things to say about this screen. Anyway, I did some tests with this camera, and I wanted to talk about my experience using it for photography, for filmmaking, and for streaming. So basically using this camera as a webcam. Beginning with the photography test, of course. This camera is great, but it's also a handicap based off of my own experiences. Let me explain. I'd say that I can take some alright pictures as someone that definitely doesn't really do this too often, but I have been pretty happy with the results so far. The viewfinder also makes it easier to take pictures, and just in case you need to use it, of course. And when you try to, your display is just going to turn itself off. And when you get close enough to the viewfinder, and it is terrible. I have a Sony a6400 with a very good viewfinder, and the one in my unit right here on my a6000 is incredibly blurry and totally unusable. Now the pictures that you do take while having it activated aren't really affected by that, but it's not really going to be a great way of taking pictures with it either way. So if I were you, I would just stick to the screen instead. So when it comes to the filming test, you also get pretty good performance with it. If you want to use this in low light, then you will want to look elsewhere. But as it is, in a decently lit environment, I would say, you can get some nice shots out of this camera for sure. It's not as sharp as I'm used to seeing, but that's mostly okay. As a budget device, and these shots do look pretty good, in my opinion. Autofocus is also pretty good and really subtle, where it is very fast when focusing, but it transitions so well from blurry to being in focus, and that I think that they had nailed this aspect about this camera quite a while ago. But I do still miss having touch controls on the display. At least tap to focus would have been really nice here. And remember that because this camera can also shoot at 60 frames per second, you can just go ahead and slow that footage down and then get yourself some slow motion footage if you really want that. So, just as a heads up. And if you wanted to use this as a streaming webcam or anything of the sort, on the other hand, then you totally can, thanks to the micro HDMI port on this camera. And you will also get a clean HDMI feed at 1080p, which is fantastic. This would certainly be an expensive webcam to use, no doubt, but it would be well worth it if you want to stay away from any of the other actual webcams out there on the market, since I don't really think that they're all that great. However, because you don't have a flip-up screen, you will have to rely on the image that you see on your streaming software if you even have a way to look at that while you're streaming something like gaming or anything of the sort. So if you're used to dealing with a webcam in that sense, then it's not really going to be any different here. And honestly, I would still trust the Sony a6000 when it comes to keeping me in focus. So it's not really that big of a deal in my opinion. So yes, this is a fantastic webcam. This camera has pretty standard battery life of around an hour, I want to say, of filming with intervals in between, obviously, since it only shoots at 1080p at 60 frames per second, at 30 frames per second, and at 24 frames per second, and I do always appreciate having options. So don't hesitate. In fact, do not scoff at getting yourself extra batteries for it so you can get more hours out of it, because you're probably going to want to if you're going to be shooting for quite a while. Now let's talk about my complaints, which I do have a decent amount of, as this camera didn't really quite satisfy me in some categories per se. For example, the electronic viewfinder always looks like it's out of focus, but the whole thing is really blurry. I thought that maybe I was just going blind on that eye, but it's just that the viewfinder is not effective on this camera. At least that's going to be the case for my unit. I do genuinely think that it is only my model that is going through this, since I bought it used, but I haven't had a good experience with it at all, and that is the viewfinder. And I do wish that this display could flip all the way around, because I would be able to vlog with it. A microphone jack would have also been a very welcome addition here, a missed opportunity if I do say so myself, but I would probably prioritize the display over the microphone jack. Other first-party lenses are really expensive, and if you're buying a budget camera like this, it does make it harder to find a lens that's still good and from a first-party vendor that you might be able to afford, and I'm pointing those fingers directly at myself here. But keep in mind that there's still going to be a ton of third-party options, so it's not really the end of the world. Also, this camera does have heating issues, which is why I think it has the recording limit, so that the camera doesn't really just like shut off and then burn out on you or anything of the sort. I don't want this to explode on me. So this is one of Sony's hidden gems at this point, since people are just more focused on the more recent releases, which is totally understandable. And like I said earlier, I bought this camera so that we could use it as the main camera for the Tech Summit podcast, which essentially is still going to be doubly used as a webcam, since we won't be recording anything with it. We are just going to use this to capture footage. If you're a streamer, then I'm sure you'll understand what I mean. Now you can only buy this used, so do make sure to go ahead and check out eBay, as you should be able to find this camera for roughly around 350 bucks, but mostly maybe around the 400-ish range if you want the lens included as well. Now, if you're starting to do photography with this camera, I would probably look elsewhere personally, because I do think that there are better options than the Sony a6000 that could still be at around that same price range. This, to me, actually comes more so across as a video camera, but you can still take some pretty good pictures with it, of course, depending on your skill. But if you're starting off, I would maybe go with a different camera instead. And honestly, I can recommend this if you're getting started on video and even as a webcam for streaming. 100%. Fantastic device. Highly recommend it. Now, with that said, if you are interested in getting yourself this device, then I will be making sure to leave affiliate links in the description. And if you end up clicking any of those links, that would be insanely helpful. There's also going to be a link to ABUNDA to help you finance this camera. And on Amazon, they tend to show up as like kits. So if you wanted to get a kit with maybe like a couple of SD cards for it and things like that, you might want to look into those. So links to that down below. This is going to help you finance it without needing a credit card of your own, which is going to be pretty cool. And there's also Luster in case you're looking for other types of alternatives, and it'll help you a lot when it comes to finding sales for just about anything. Now, with that said, I would like to give a very special thanks to all of our patrons, beginning with the tier 3s, which are going to be Omar, Saad Al-Wazal, and Joe Moss. Thank you so much for all of your support, because it really does go a long way. And now on to the tier 2s coming right up. And this is super important. I would just like to give a very special thanks to all of our patrons, which are going to be listed right here on the screen. Again, a massive thanks to you all for supporting us to help us create the kind of content that we bring to you on a day-to-day basis. And thank you so much for supporting the Tech Summit podcast as well. And just remember that if you would like to be a part of this community too, and then do make sure to check out the links to our Patreon, where you don't only get bonus episodes of our podcast, but you also get automatically entered into one of our monthly giveaways of a tech product that we have reviewed that is of at least $50 in value or higher. So links to that down below. Now, don't forget to follow me on Instagram and, of course, on Twitch, where I do stream fairly often. Now, with that out of the way, this is Spin Francisco from Tech Summit. Thank you so much for watching, and I will be seeing you all later. Enjoy.